My name is Isadora Mwangi, and I am 39 years old. 3 months ago, my brother Isaac pulled into the parking lot of the Hartwell Inn, which is a 12-room boutique hotel in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia that I have owned and operated for 2 years. In the silver Acura that he bought with my wedding fund 4 years ago. He did not know it was my hotel. He knew it was a hotel he had found online that had good reviews and reasonable rates, and that was a short drive from the hiking trail he wanted to do with his girlfriend. He pulled in, got out of the car, walked up the steps of the porch with his bag over his shoulder, and found me standing at the check-in desk. He said my name with the specific quality of someone who has encountered a fact that their working picture of the world has not prepared them for. I said, "Welcome to the Hartwell Inn." Before I tell you what I said next and what he said and what happened over the 3 days he spent at my hotel, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I want to know where you are. Now, let me take you back 5 years to a Friday evening in December in the kitchen of my parents' house in Richmond, Virginia, and the conversation that turned a wedding fund into a car and a hotel that my brother did not know existed. My parents, whose names are Thomas and Miriam Mwangi, came to the United States from Kenya in 1983 and built a life in Richmond with the specific and deliberate thoroughness of people who understood that everything was constructed from intention, and that intention without documentation tended to dissolve in the family's general atmosphere of accommodation and management, and the specific kind of optimism that does not distinguish between a plan and a hope. My father worked for 27 years as an accountant for a regional engineering firm. My mother taught secondary school for 22 years. They are practical people in the specific sense of people who understand that practical and emotional are not opposites, that organizing something carefully is itself a form of love, and that the failure to organize something carefully is a failure of love that announces itself in the specifics. They are also people who love both of their children with a completeness that has made it difficult for them, over the years, to see clearly when one of their children was producing a situation that required something other than love, which is accountability, which requires seeing the situation rather than the person. Isaac is 2 years older than me and has been, for most of his adult life, a person of significant charm and intermittent follow-through, which is a description I've arrived at over 39 years of being his sister, and which I offer without bitterness, because bitterness is not useful, and accuracy is. He has genuine intelligence and the specific gift of making people feel understood and valued in his presence, which has produced over the years a supply of goodwill that has exceeded the demand he has placed on it and has led him to believe, not unreasonably given the evidence available to him, that the goodwill is bottomless. It is not bottomless. I know this because I have watched the supply and the demand for 41 years, and I have seen the accounting that Isaac does not do, which is the accounting of what the goodwill has cost the people who have extended it. My parents have extended it more than anyone. I have extended it more than I should have. The wedding fund was the largest withdrawal. The wedding fund was savings. I want to be specific about this because specific is the only accurate description of what it was. It was money I'd saved over 7 years, beginning at 28 when I got engaged to my then partner and continuing through the 2 years after we broke off the engagement in 2019, during which period I kept the savings because I had decided to use them differently. The fund, by December of 2020, contained $42,000. I had not yet told my family what I intended to do with it, which was to buy a small property in the mountains and convert it into a boutique hotel, which was a plan I had been developing for 3 years and which I had not shared with anyone except my closest friend, Amina, because I had learned over the years that sharing plans with my family before they were executable produced a specific kind of well-intentioned interference that was not useful, and that the plan was not executable until I had the money, and that I had the money in the savings account. In December of 2020, Isaac's car failed. It had been failing progressively for 6 months, and the failure had been accelerating, and by December, it was no longer operable. Which is to say, it sat in front of his apartment in Richmond and could not be started, and Isaac needed a car to get to his job, which was in sales for a building materials company in the suburbs, and which required him to drive to job sites and to client meetings, and which he would lose if he did not have transportation. He told my parents. My parents told me. The implication of the telling was not stated, but was present in the specific way that implications are present in my family, which is as an expectation of response that is framed as information. Isaac needed a car. I had savings. The connection was available to be drawn. I drew it in a way that was different from what they expected, which was that I said I would lend Isaac $12,000 toward a car on the condition that he sign a promissory note with a repayment schedule. My father said that seemed formal for a family situation. I said I thought it was appropriate to be formal, precisely because it was a family situation. My mother said Isaac would pay it back. I said I knew he would pay it back faster with a written agreement than without one. The promissory note was prepared. Isaac signed it. He bought the Acura in January of 2021. He has not repaid any of the $12,000. I am not in financial distress because of this. The promissory note is in a file folder. Both of those things are true. I want to stop here because there is something I need to ask you before this story continues. Have you ever lent money to someone in your family with the sincere intention of making it a loan and not a gift? And have you ever watched the loan become a gift through the slow process of it not being repaid and nobody mentioning that it had not been repaid? Tell me in the comments what that felt like. I read everyone. And please subscribe now if you have not already, because what I did with the remaining $30,000 in the wedding fund, and what I built with it, and what my brother found when he arrived at the hotel he had booked online, is the part this story has been building toward. The Hartwell Inn sits on 11 acres of property in Augusta County, Virginia, at an elevation of 2,000 feet, and it was built in 1912 as a summer house for a family from Richmond who used it for 30 years and sold it in 1942, and it passed through 4 subsequent owners before I bought it in 2021 for $310,000, which required the $30,000 of wedding fund savings as the down payment and a commercial real estate loan for the remainder, which I qualified for because I had been working for 15 years as a hotel operations manager and had the professional history that the loan required. I want to be specific about what I had been doing before the Hartwell Inn, because the professional history is the foundation of the story, and without it, the story does not make sense. I have worked in hotel operations since I was 22. I started as a front desk associate at a mid-size hotel in Richmond and moved through the operational hierarchy over 15 years. Front desk to shift supervisor to operations manager to regional operations consultant, which is the role I held when I bought the Hartwell Inn, and which I gave up to run it full-time in 2022. The hotel management and the wedding fund savings were running in parallel for 7 years, and neither of them was visible to my family in its full dimension, which is to say, my family knew I worked in hotels and knew I had savings, but did not know the scale of the savings, or the depth of the professional expertise, or the plan that had been developing since 2017, which was to own something rather than to operate something for someone else, which is the ambition that 15 years of hotel operations had produced, and that I had been building toward with the specific patience of someone who knows what the destination requires and is assembling the requirements one at a time. The renovation took 11 months. I project managed it myself, which was not a coincidence and not bravado. It was the application of 15 years of hotel operations knowledge to a construction project, meaning I knew what a hotel needed to function at the level I wanted it to function. I knew how to read a contractor's bid. I knew what questions to ask the trades about timelines and materials, and I knew how to manage a parallel sequence of tasks that were interdependent in the way that hotel construction always is. The renovation cost $127,000 and came in $8,000 under the initial estimate, which I also consider an application of professional knowledge rather than luck. The hotel opened in April of 2022 with 12 rooms, a dining room that seats 24, a porch that runs the length of the south face of the building, and views of the Blue Ridge that are the kind of views that people who live near mountains stop noticing, and that people who have been in cities too long find physically affecting when they encounter them. The hotel has a 4.8 rating on the booking platforms with 214 reviews. It generates revenue that covers the loan payment and the operational costs, and provides me a salary that is appropriate to a small business owner in its second year. None of this is visible from the road. The sign at the end of the driveway says Hartwell Inn in letters I had carved by a local craftsperson, and the porch is visible from the road, but the hotel itself is set back 300 feet from the driveway, and Isaac turned in without knowing what he was turning into. Before I describe the check-in, I need to describe the 3 years between January 2021, when Isaac bought the car, and the October when he arrived at my hotel. The promissory note sat in the file folder. I did not mention it at family gatherings. Isaac did not mention it. My parents did not mention it. The car was mentioned frequently because Isaac liked the car, and because the car had been the solution to a problem, and solutions to problems have a way of being remembered and celebrated longer than the processes that produce them, and the process that had produced this solution was my savings, and the promissory note that was not being repaid, which nobody was mentioning. I made a decision in the second year of the not mentioning that I was going to let the not mentioning continue until a moment arrived when the mentioning was available in a form that could be received, which required 2 things that did not exist yet, which were the hotel being a going concern and Isaac seeing it. The hotel became a going concern in its first year. Isaac seeing it was a matter of probability and geography, and the algorithm of a booking platform that had apparently decided, based on his search history, that he was the kind of person who would enjoy a boutique hotel in the Blue Ridge Mountains. He was. He booked a 3-night stay. Isaac said my name in the specific way I described, which was the way you say someone's name when the fact of their presence in a location has produced a short circuit in your expectation machinery. I said, "Welcome to the Hartwell Inn." He looked at the lobby, which has the specific quality that I intended for it when I designed the renovation, which is the quality of a place that has been here for a long time, and that has been maintained with care, and that is completely itself, rather than being a design concept applied to a space. He looked at the porch through the glass doors. He looked at the mountains through the porch windows. He looked at me. He said, "Is this yours?" I said it is. He said, "Since when?" I said 2 years. He said he had no idea. I said I knew. His girlfriend, whose name is Priya, and who I had met once briefly at a family event, was standing beside him with the polite uncertainty of someone who understands that something significant is happening in a conversation she does not have the full context for. I smiled at her and said I was glad they had chosen the Hartwell Inn and that I would get them checked in and show them to their room. I got them checked in. I showed them to their room. The room has a view of the mountains from the bed and an ensuite bathroom with a clawfoot tub and a wood-burning fireplace, and it is one of the 4 rooms I consider the best in the hotel. And I had put them in it because they had booked it. Not as a gesture, and the fact that they had chosen one of the 4 best rooms, because the reviews had made it clear those were the rooms to request, told me something about how the hotel was presenting itself to the people who found it, which was accurately. Before I tell you what Isaac and I talked about on the second evening of his stay, and what he said about the promissory note, and what I said about the promissory note, and what we said about the $12,000 and the $30,000 and the 41 years of the relationship, I want to stop here. If you have ever built something and had the person who owed you something arrive at it without knowing it was yours, I want to hear about that moment. I want to hear what you said, and what they said, and what the room felt like when you said it. Tell me in the comments. Subscribe now if you have not already, because the conversation on the second evening is the one I have been building this whole story toward, and it is not the conversation that ends with an apology. The first evening, Isaac and Priya had dinner in the dining room, and I sat at the front desk and gave them their privacy, because they were guests, and I was the proprietor, and the roles were the roles regardless of the relationship, which is something I decided before they arrived, and which I maintained throughout the 3 days. I greeted them at breakfast the next morning with the same warmth I offer every guest, which is specific and interested and not performative, and Isaac looked at me across the dining room with the expression of someone who is trying to determine what version of a situation they are in. After breakfast, he asked if I had time to talk. I said I had an hour before a staff meeting. We sat on the south porch. He said he had not known about the hotel. I said I knew. He said he wished I had told him. I said I had not told anyone in the family until the hotel was open and running and speaking for itself, because my experience of telling my family things before they were executable was that the telling produced a particular kind of engagement that was not useful to what I was trying to build. He was quiet for a moment. He said he understood. I said I thought he understood now, and that I was not sure he would have understood before, meaning before seeing the hotel. He said that was probably right. I said I wanted to talk about the promissory note. He did not say he had forgotten about the promissory note, because we both knew he had not forgotten about the promissory note. He said he had been intending to start repaying it. I said I knew that. I said I wanted him to understand something before we talked about the repayment, which was that the $12,000 was not the number I wanted to discuss first. He looked at me. I said I wanted to discuss the $30,000 first. He said he did not know what I meant. I said the wedding fund had contained $42,000. He said he had not known that. I said I knew he had not known that, and that I was telling him now because I wanted him to understand the scale of what had been available and what had been used, not to produce guilt, but to produce an accurate accounting, because accurate accounting was the only foundation I knew for a conversation that was actually going to change anything. I told him about the fund. I told him about the 7 years of saving, and the broken engagement, and the decision to keep saving, and the plan that had been developing since 2017. I told him about the down payment and the commercial loan and the 11 months of renovation and the opening in April of 2022. I told him about the $12,000 in the file folder and the note that had not been touched in 3 years, and the decision I had made not to mention it until this moment. He listened in the way that he listens when he is genuinely listening, which is without the impatience that he shows when he is waiting for his turn to speak. When I finished, he looked at the mountains for a moment. He said he had not understood the scale of what I was doing. I said I knew. He said he should have asked. I said the information was not hidden from him, it was not shared, and that there was a difference between those two things, and that I had not shared it because my family had a pattern of receiving my plans with a specific kind of well-intentioned engagement that was not useful, and that the pattern had produced in me the decision to build things first and share them afterward. He said that was fair, and that it was also sad. I said I thought so too. He said what did I want from him in terms of the $12,000. I said I wanted him to pay it back on a schedule that he could actually maintain and that we would write down together. He said he could pay $500 a month. I said that was 24 months to repay the $12,000. He said he knew. I said I would have the schedule drawn up and that he could sign it at checkout if he was ready to. He said he would be ready. He was. Priya was not present for the morning conversation on the porch. She had gone for a walk on one of the trails that start from the hotel's property and that are listed in the welcome book I put in each room. I had written the welcome book myself, and it had been my most personal piece of writing in the hotel's 2 years of operation, meaning I had written it the way I write things when I am writing for the people who are going to be in the space, rather than for the property itself. And the trail section was the section I was most proud of because I had hiked all of the trails before I opened, and I had described each one from the inside rather than from a description I had found elsewhere. Priya came back from her walk while Isaac and I were still on the porch, and she sat down across from us and said she had seen a pair of red-tailed hawks on the upper trail and that the hotel was extraordinary and that she was sorry she had not found it sooner. She said it to me specifically, looking at me, and I understood from the way she looked that she had some sense of what the hotel meant and what it had taken, which told me that Isaac had been talking to her the previous evening after dinner while I was at the front desk, and that he had been working out what he understood and sharing it with her as he worked it out. I said I was glad she'd come. I meant it. Isaac signed the new payment schedule at checkout on the third morning. He did it at the front desk with the same pen I use for the guest book, a specific pen I keep in a drawer because it writes consistently and because I find the consistency satisfying in the way that small instruments of precision are satisfying in contexts where precision matters. He signed and I countersigned, and I made a copy, and I put the original in the file folder next to the first promissory note, which had produced nothing, and I put the copy in an envelope and gave it to him. He put it in his jacket pocket. He said he was sorry. He said it in the voice that I have learned to recognize over 41 years of being his sister as the voice of something he means rather than something he is saying to close a conversation. And I received it as what it was, and I said I knew, and that I appreciated him saying it. He picked up his bag. Priya said the clawfoot tub was the most comfortable thing she had encountered in years. I said I was glad they went to the car. The silver Acura in the parking lot? He got in and he looked at the hotel for a moment through the windshield, the way people look at places when they are leaving, and they want to hold the image. And then he backed out and drove down the driveway, and I watched the car until it was on the road, and then I went back inside and back to work. The first payment arrived on the 15th of the following month, $500 as specified, which I deposited and recorded in the file. The second arrived on the 15th of the month after that. We are 4 months in and 4 payments received. I do not consider this a resolution because 4 payments is not 24 payments, and 24 months is a long time, and the pattern of the first promissory note is available as a reference point. What I consider it is a different structure, meaning the new agreement is built on a visit that changed what Isaac understood, and on a conversation that produced an accurate accounting rather than an avoided one, and on the specific fact of my hotel existing and being what it is, which is the thing I built while the previous agreement was accumulating its years of not being mentioned. The hotel is the argument. I did not make the argument with words. I made it with 11 acres and 12 rooms and 214 reviews, and the specific weight of a place that has been built by someone who knew what she was building and why. I want to describe the hotel in more detail than I have, because the hotel is the central character of the second half of this story, and it has received less description than it deserves. The Hartwell Inn is a federal-style structure from 1912 with the original 6-over-6 windows in the main rooms and the wide plank pine floors that were there when the house was built, and that I had refinished rather than replaced, because replacing them would have been the wrong decision. and I have been making decisions about historic properties long enough to know the difference. The renovation preserved the building's original bones and updated the systems, meaning new electrical, new plumbing, new insulation, all hidden inside the existing walls where possible, so the rooms look as they were intended to look in 1912 and function as guests in 2022 expect them to function. The 12 rooms are named for trees that are present on the property, which was my own idea, and which I implemented against the advice of the interior designer I consulted, who thought naming rooms for trees was rustic in the wrong register, and who was incorrect, and whose invoices I paid in full, while overruling her on this specific point. The dining room serves a fixed breakfast menu every morning, using produce from 2 local farms that I established relationships with before the hotel opened, which required a level of operational planning that preceded the opening by 6 months, and which the reviews mention specifically as a reason they return, which means the advanced planning is visible in the guest experience in exactly the way I intended. The porch is the porch I described to myself in 2017 when I first imagined the hotel I was going to build, which is a porch that runs the full length of the south face and that faces the mountains and that has rocking chairs that were made by a craftsperson in the next county who also made the sign at the end of the driveway. The sign and the rocking chairs match. This was intentional. My parents visited the hotel in January of this year, 3 months after Isaac's visit. I had told them about the hotel when it opened, which they had received with the warmth and the slight glaze of people who love you and are proud of you, and who have not quite understood the scale of what you are describing, and the visit changed that in the way that seeing always changes things that have only been described. My father walked through the rooms with the focused attention of an accountant reviewing a physical asset, meaning he was looking at what the hotel was worth and what had gone into producing it and whether the numbers held together, and he said at the end of the walkthrough that it was a serious operation. Not impressive. Serious, which is the word he uses for things that are built correctly, and that will hold. My mother sat on the porch for an hour and looked at the mountains and said nothing, which is her version of the most complete response available, and I sat with her and we did not need to talk about what we were doing, because we both understood what we were doing, which was being together in a place I had built with the patience and the intention that she had modeled for me in 22 years of teaching, and which I had applied to the project in a way that she recognized without my having to name it. Isaac made his payment this month. He will make the next one next month. 20 months remain after this one. I do not think about the 20 months as a countdown to a completion, which is a frame that produces impatience, but as a record being assembled entry by entry, which is a frame that produces attention. Each payment is a dated entry. The file folder is in my office at the hotel, in the desk that faces the window that faces east, so the morning light comes through it when I am doing the work I do in the mornings, which is the administrative work that a hotel requires, and which I find satisfying in the specific way that the management of a complex system is satisfying when the system is yours, and you have built it, and you understand every element of it, and you are responsible for every decision about it. The file folder is in the drawer. The promissory note is in the folder, the first one and the second one. The Hartwell Inn is around me. The mountains are out the window. My brother's car is not in the parking lot today, but it was in it 3 months ago. And the fact of its having been there is in the record of the hotel's history, which is a record I am building entry by entry, the same way the repayment is being built, which is to say, one payment at a time. I want to describe the 15 years of hotel operations before the Hartwell Inn more fully than I have, because the professional history is the actual foundation of this story, and I have treated it as backstory when it is the primary thing. I started at the front desk of the Bowen Hotel in Richmond in 2007 at the age of 22 with a hospitality management degree from a state school program that my parents had supported and that I had paid for, in part through work-study positions in the university's food service operations, which is where I learned that the back-of-house work of hospitality was the work that determined everything visible at the front, and that the visible part was downstream of decisions made in rooms where the guests never went. I worked the front desk for 2 years, and I was promoted to shift supervisor in 2009 because the operations manager at the time, a woman named Claudette Harrington, who had been running hotels for 20 years and who had the specific intelligence of someone who can look at a system and see immediately where it is and where it needs to be, said she had been watching me for 18 months and that what she had observed was someone who understood the whole picture rather than only the piece she was currently managing. I worked under Claudette for 4 years, and she was the most useful professional relationship I have ever had. Not because she told me things directly, but because she put me in situations that required me to develop the judgment I was going to need and then let me develop it, which is the form of mentorship that produces the most durable learning because the learning comes from doing rather than from instruction. By 2013, 6 years into my career, I was operations manager of a 200-room hotel in Richmond, and by 2016, I was regional operations consultant for a portfolio of 7 hotels across Virginia and North Carolina, which is the role that gave me the complete picture of hotel operations, at a scale I had not previously managed, and that showed me everything about how small hotels fail and why. The failures were almost always the same, which was that the person who had built the hotel did not have a complete operational understanding of what they had built and made decisions that looked reasonable from the outside and were unsustainable from the inside. I had the inside understanding. I had been building it for 15 years. What I did not have until I had the wedding fund savings was the capital for the down payment. And what I did not have until I found the Hartwell Inn property was the right building. And what I did not have until I had both of those things and the commercial loan approved was the moment to leave my consulting work and commit fully to the project. The moment arrived in 2021. I moved to Augusta County. I started the renovation. Everything that followed was the application of 15 years of professional knowledge to a project I had been preparing for without knowing specifically what the project would be. The professional history and the wedding fund savings and the plan I had been developing since 2017 were all parts of the same architecture, and the architecture was mine and had been mine and was already sound before Isaac pulled into the parking lot with the Acura. Amina is my closest friend and has been since we met in graduate school in 2006, and she is the only person I told about the Hartwell Inn plan before I executed it, and I want to describe her here because she has been in the background of this story in a way that does not reflect her actual function. She is a financial planner in Richmond, and she has the specific quality of someone who can hold a large amount of information about a plan without needing to intervene in the plan, which is different from most people's response to plans they are trusted with, which is to begin shaping the plan toward their own understanding of what it should be. Amina held the Hartwell Inn plan for 3 years, and she said exactly 3 things about it during those 3 years. The first was in 2018 when I told her about it, which was that she thought I was the right person for the project. The second was in 2020 when the wedding fund reached $42,000, which was that she thought the number looked right. The third was in 2021 when I closed on the property, which was that she was going to come up in the summer and she wanted the room with the best view. I put her in the cedar room, which faces southwest and catches the evening light. She came in August of 2022, and she sat on the porch, and she said it was exactly what she had understood it would be. I asked what she had understood it would be. She said she had understood it would be something built by someone who knew what they were doing, and that what they were doing was both the hospitality and the larger thing, which was making a place that was completely itself. I said I had tried to do that. She said I had succeeded. She paid the standard room rate because she had insisted and because I had concluded she was right to insist, which was that the hotel having friends who paid was more useful than the hotel having friends who didn't. She was right. She almost always is. I also want to say something about the staff, Because the Hartwell Inn is not a one-person operation, and the people who work in it are part of what makes it what it is. I have 4 full-time employees and 3 part-time. My general manager is a woman named Clara who came to me from a larger hotel operation in Charlottesville and who had been looking for a role in a smaller property where she could have more operational responsibility, which is exactly what I offered her, and exactly what she has used well. The kitchen is managed by a cook named Delbert, who grew up in Augusta County and who has been cooking in the mountains for 30 years and who understands the specific ingredients that the landscape produces better than anyone I have ever worked with, and whose menus are the reason the breakfast reviews consistently mention the food specifically rather than generally, which is the difference between a review that says the breakfast was good and a review that says the biscuits were the best I have had in Virginia, which is what 5 of the reviews in the last 6 months have said about Delbert's biscuits. The housekeeping team is 2 people who work with the efficiency and the pride of someone who understands that their work is the foundation of the guest's experience and that the guest's memory of the hotel is the memory of the room they slept in. And my housekeeping team produces rooms that deserve the reviews they produce. None of this is accidental, and none of it was luck. It is 15 years of knowing what a hotel requires and building the specific version of those requirements that this hotel and this landscape and this scale demanded. I want to describe the conversation I had with my parents about the Hartwell Inn before I told them it existed. I had not told them during the renovation, and I had not told them during the opening, and I told them 6 weeks after the opening, when I had run a full operational month and had the first 30 reviews and had the confidence of a month of evidence, rather than the confidence of an intention. I called them on a Sunday evening, and I told them I had bought a hotel property in the Blue Ridge Mountains 2 years earlier, and that I had renovated it, and that it had been open for 6 weeks and was operating well. My father was quiet for a moment, and then he said he did not understand why I had not told them sooner. I said I had not told anyone sooner, not because I was withholding something, but because I had found over the years that telling plans before they were executable produced a form of engagement from people who loved me that was not always useful, and that I had preferred to build it and then show it. He said he had not known that about me, that I kept things until they were done. I said I thought I had always been that way, and that perhaps he had not noticed. He said perhaps not. He said he was proud of me. He said it in the flat and direct voice he uses when he means something rather than when he is expressing something, and I received it as what it was. My mother asked how many rooms. I said 12. She said that was a real hotel. I said it was. She asked whether I was happy. I said I was doing the work I had been preparing to do for 15 years, and that yes, I was happy. She was quiet for a moment in the way that she is quiet when she is feeling something rather than thinking about it, and then she said she was glad. That was the conversation. It did not include any discussion of the wedding fund, or the promissory note, or the $12,000, because those were not the subject of the call, and because I had decided they would be the subject of a different conversation with a different person at a different time. And that time arrived 3 months later when Isaac pulled the Acura into the parking lot. There is something I want to add about the 3 days of Isaac's stay that I have not described, which is the 3rd morning, the morning of checkout. Before the conversation at the front desk where he signed the new payment schedule. He and Priya came down to breakfast early, and I was in the dining room, and we had breakfast together, which is not something I usually do with guests, but which felt right, and which I chose, because the 3 days had shifted the context from proprietor and guest to something that was both of those things, and also the relationship we had had for 41 years. He told me about his job, and I told him about the hotel's second-year projections, and we talked about our parents and about a cousin's upcoming wedding, and about a hiking trail Priya had found that she wanted to return for. The conversation was ordinary, in the way that conversations are ordinary, when the significant thing has been said. And what remains is the texture of two people who are going to continue knowing each other. He paid his bill at the checkout. I processed it with the same card system I use for every guest. He left a cash tip in the envelope that I put in every room with the note that the staff would appreciate any gratuity the guest found appropriate, which was a larger tip than most guests leave, and I noted it without commenting on it. He signed the new payment schedule. He picked up his bag. They went to the car. I have thought about the 3-day stay and about what it changed and what it did not change, and I want to be honest about both. What it changed was Isaac's picture of what I had built, which was the thing I had been waiting to change, because the picture was the foundation of the conversation, and the conversation was the foundation of the new agreement. What it did not change was the history that produced the need for the conversation, which is the history of a family system in which the goodwill in Isaac's direction had exceeded the accountability in his direction for a long time, and that history does not reverse in 3 days, regardless of how significant the 3 days are. What I have is a new agreement and 4 payments received, and the beginning of a different kind of accountability that the hotel visit made possible, and I am going to hold those things as what they are, which is a beginning and not a completion, and I am going to continue to run the hotel and to note each payment when it arrives and to build the record that the file folder holds, and at some point in the next 20 months, the record will be complete, and that completion will be its own kind of thing, different from resolution and closer to accounting, which is the more useful concept for a situation like this. My former mentor, Claudette Harrington, came to the Hartwell Inn in the spring of this year. I had stayed in contact with her over the years, infrequently, in the way that professional relationships maintain themselves through occasional contact that does not require continuity to mean something. And I had told her about the hotel when it opened, and she had said she would come when she could, and she came in May, on a Thursday, and checked in for 2 nights. She walked through the hotel the way she walked through hotels when she was assessing them professionally, which is without performing a reaction, just observing, and I gave her the tour in the same way I gave every guest a tour, which was specifically and honestly, and without overselling anything. She stayed in the Oak Room, which is on the 2nd floor with the clearest mountain view of any of the 12 rooms. At dinner, the first evening, she said I had done exactly what she had expected me to do, which was to build something that was better than its classification, meaning it was a small property, and it operated at the level of a larger one. I said I had had a good teacher. She said she had not taught me that specifically, that the understanding of how small hotels could fail had come from the 7-hotel portfolio I had managed, and that what she had taught me was how to look at a system and see it accurately rather than optimistically. I said I thought those were the same lesson in different registers. She said she supposed they were. We had dinner, and we talked for 2 hours about the business of hospitality and about what I had built and about the directions I was considering for the hotel's 3rd year, and by the time she left on Saturday morning, she had made 2 specific suggestions about the dining room that I had not thought of and that I implemented within the month. This is also what good mentorship produces over a long time, which is that the person you mentored becomes someone whose judgment you can learn from, and that the learning goes in both directions eventually, which means the original relationship has produced something that neither of you could have built alone. The Hartwell Inn's 3rd year begins in April. I have 47 reservations on the books already, which is more than I had at the same point in the 2nd year, which is more than I had at the same point in the 1st year, which is the trend line that a business needs to be on to be what it is intended to be. I have been working on a partnership with a hiking guide service in the county that will offer guided trail experiences for hotel guests, which was Priya's suggestion on the last morning of her stay, which she offered in the specific way of someone who has done a thing and found it good and wants to share the finding rather than keep it. I said I thought that was a good idea. She said she had been thinking about it since the 2nd day. I said I would call the guide service the following week. I called them the following week. The partnership is in development. The guide is a local woman named Terry, who has been hiking the Blue Ridge since she was a child, and who describes the trails in the specific language of someone who has loved a landscape long enough to know it rather than to see it, which is the quality I was looking for, and which she has, and which the guests are going to find as useful and as moving as I do when Terry describes what they are going to walk through before they walk through it. The hiking partnership will be available to guests starting in the spring. This is the kind of thing that happens when you build something real and then hold it open to the people who arrive in it, which is that they bring their own observations and their own gifts, and the building becomes more than what you built alone. The file folder in the desk drawer has 6 items in it. The first promissory note, signed in January 2021, which has no payment record attached to it because no payments were made against it. The second promissory note, signed at the Hartwell Inn front desk in October of last year, which has 4 payment receipts attached to it, each one dated the 15th of the month and each one for $500. The Acura purchase record that Isaac sent me in 2021, which he sent because I had asked for it, so I could see what the $12,000 had produced, which was a 4-year-old silver sedan with 60,000 miles on it that is currently parked in front of his apartment in Richmond, and that is, by his own account at breakfast on the 3rd morning, running well. A copy of the hotel's deed, which has my name on it, a copy of the commercial loan documents, and the welcome card that my parents sent when the hotel opened, which arrived 6 weeks after I told them, and which was addressed correctly to me, in my mother's handwriting, with a note inside that said, "We always knew you would build something worth keeping." I read that line the first time, and then I folded the card and put it in the folder, because folding it and putting it in the folder was my way of receiving it correctly, which was as evidence of something I am going to need to be able to find again, and which I have found again on the mornings when I need to remember that the building was not done in spite of my family, but alongside them, even when alongside felt like alone, even when the alongside meant that I built in the quiet rather than in front of them, even when the quiet was the necessary condition for the building to happen at all. The hotel is around me. The file folder is in the drawer. The payment will arrive on the 15th. If you have ever built something that told the truth about you more completely than anything you could have said, I want to hear about what you built and what happened when the people who needed to understand arrived and found it. Tell me in the comments. Tell me what they saw and what it changed. And if you are still building, still in the part before the arrival, I want you to know that the building is the argument and the arrival will happen in the way that arrivals happen, which is when the thing is ready to be found. Subscribe if you have not already, and check the link in the description. There is more there, and I think you will find what you are looking for.